welcome to this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board. My name is Councillor Philip Roberts. I'm the Chairman of this board. Councillor Kane Parkinson, Vice Chairman of the board, is also in attendance. Can I remind you that the audio-visual feed of this formal public meeting is being streamed live and recorded and will be subsequently made available via the County Council's website, and all your comments will remain accessible online. With this in mind, I would like to welcome members of the public and press watching for our meeting today. Executive present, we have Councillor Tom Catton, Executive Councillor for Resources, and Councillor Natalie Oliver, Children's Services. And, of course, Councillor Sean Matthews, Leader of the Council. The CLT present, welcome to the following members of the corporate leadership team who are present today. Andrew Crookham, Deputy Chief Executive and Executive Director of Resources, and Nicole Hilton, Assistant Director of Communities. Health and safety, there is no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of a fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the chamber and exit the building via the front doors and congregate in a car park in the front of the building where we will await further instructions. Device loop. Can I remind everyone to ensure their mobiles, laptops and iPads are on silent for the duration of this meeting. The hearing loop is now activated. A request to speak will be collated by the Vice Chairman. If you wish to speak during the meeting, can you please raise your hand and the Vice Chairman will make a note. We will try to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to ask questions and make contributions. Therefore, I would appreciate contributions to be succinct and concise, and also that you indicate early when you wish to speak. Apologies for absence. Emily.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Collier, Councillor Hill and Emile van der Zee. We also have Councillor Vernon in attendance as a substitute for Councillor Hill, and if I could also just note apologies from the Chief Executive.
Thank you. Members of the board are reminded that they only need to declare any relevant interests which are not declared on their declaration of pecuniary interest form. Do any members wish to declare an interest? Item 3. Minutes of the meeting held on the 28th of August 2025. This is to confirm and sign the minutes from the last meeting of the board on the 28th of August 2025 as a correct record. This can be found on pages 5 to 16 of the agenda pack. Do I have a proposer? Woodruff. Seconder? Parkinson. Those in favour? Do I recognise the minutes? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you. These minutes are agreed as correct and accurate record. Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillors and Chief Officers. I have no announcements to make today, but to ensure efficient use of our time, can I ask presenters to keep their report instructions brief to allow ample time for discussion and consideration of all agenda items. Executive Councillor announcements. Are there any executive announcements from Councillor Sean Matthews? Councillor Tom Catton. Are there any Chief Officer announcements from Andy Crookham? No? Emily, are there any call-ins to consider?
No, none received, Chairman.
Emily, do we have any received any councillor calls for action?
No, none received.
Agenda item number 7. King Charles III England Coast Path, Gibraltar Point Bridge. This pre-decision scrutiny report can be found on pages 17 to 30 of the agenda pack. This report sets out the case for building a new bridge at Gibraltar Point as part of the King Charles III English Coast Path. It seeks approval for the necessary construction arrangements for the Council to provide the upfront funding, which will later be reimbursed through the national programme. The Executive Council for Resources and Executive Council for Highways and Transport are due to consider the report for a decision on the 20th of October 2025. Our actions in terms of the input requested from the board are: consider and report and determine whether members support the recommendation to the executive councillors as set out on page 19, and to agree that the board's comments be passed on to the executive in relation to this item. This report will be presented by Chris Miller, Head of Environment, Andrew Fletcher, Public Rights of Way and Access Manager, is also present for the debate. Now over to you, Mr. Miller.
Thank you, Chairman, for the introduction, and good morning, councillors. Yes, the report in front of you is regarding a reasonably large piece of infrastructure on the King Charles III England Coast Path at Gibraltar Point on the east coast. Just by way of explanation, the paper is being brought to this board as it's something that falls between both environment and highways, so it's cross-cutting. So, and for purposes of expeditious process, we've brought it to this this meeting. Obviously, I'll take the paper as read, but just highlighting some pertinent elements, and by way of background, the Marine and Coastal Access Act in 2009 extended the definition of open access land, often referred to as right to roam land, to also include the coastal margin of the English coastline. And within that margin, there was to be a pedestrian route located to form a coastal path around the entire English coastline, which will become a national trail once complete, alongside the existing trails such as the Pennine Way, the Cotswolds Way and the North Downs Way and others, and will be recognised in name as the King Charles III England Coast Path. Our role in this as a county council is part of the delivery arm for Natural England, who lead on this on behalf of DEFRA. Given the size of the task of this nationally, all access authorities such as ourselves play a part in making that assistance in route selection in that process, as well as undertaking the establishment works to facilitate the path itself. Both these elements are 100% funded by the government through legal agreements made each year regarding the required works and the associated costs, inclusive of the management fee for the time spent by officers on the project. In Lincolnshire, the majority of the route from Sutton Bridge to the Humber Bridge is open, save for the section highlighted in the paper, dependent on the installation of the bridge. In fact, you can actually, aside from this bridge, you can go all the way from Scotland down to the Thames. So this is a really key piece of infrastructure now for Natural England and the programme itself. It is also the single largest and most costly piece of infrastructure across the whole project. The costs have now risen beyond the key decision level of £500,000, as the paper outlines, and the requirement for the council to forward fund the delivery of the bridge, with costs being defrayed by drawing down on the allocated grant for the works retrospectively. And that's done in increments as and when individual elements of the project are completed. We place that with Natural England, and they provide the funding to cover it. As you will note, the recommendations made are that the council approves the forward funding and that delegation is made to ensure timely delivery of the bridge in award of contract and delivery. Determining not to proceed could raise the risk and liability toward abortive costs for elements of the project already undertaken. Regards future maintenance, once installed, the design life of the bridge is 120 years and the approximately 50 years for the decking materials. And as part of the management of the trail, the access authority is expected to maintain it for a minimum of 5 years. However, that is also part funded by the National Trails funding formula, which applies to all national trails across the country. We only provide a small amount, which is already budgeted for going forward. And that's my report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. We'll now move on to the members' debate. Councillor Dilks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, all. I really welcome the report that you've given. Thank you very much. I'm sure we'd all want to support the recommendation in it, but I do have a few questions. I'm saying that is this the only bit currently stopping you walking from along the coast from Scotland to Thames? Or are there others? I've got more questions, but go on.
It was what I was informed by Natural England yesterday at the National Programme Board, that this piece of infrastructure is that important because it's that link between those two parts. The rest of the route's open. The only bit that isn't is between, I think, just north of Boston to Gibraltar Point because of this bridge.
Wow, thank you. Really important then, isn't it? Thank you. I just wondered if you could tell us a bit. I read in the papers that there is an existing bridge, but it's assessed as being not capable of supporting the level of expected public traffic. But, you know, if I might say, it's just, are people not able to use the existing bridge at all? Is it completely rotten? Or if you could just sort of update us on that, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Not a problem. Yeah, there is a bridge in situ. It's not a public bridge. It's, in fact, ownership of it was difficult to find out, but we believe it to be owned by the local drainage board. On assessment by our technical officers, it was deemed unsuitable for public use. A lot of the decking is missing or rotting through. It's a metal structure and it's rotting through. It's been in situ for many, many years. And it's just not really capable of the standards required for a national trail.
Okay, I only ask that because obviously it's 1.8 million. It's a lot of money, whoever's paying for it. Could you just tell us something about the span of the bridge? I couldn't actually get that from the papers. And what is the detour if you had to go round? How long would it be?
So the bridge spans 42 metres. So
42?
It's quite substantial in terms of the sort of bridges we would normally deal through the rights of way and access side of things. The detour, which would require a full reinvestigation of the route in that area that would then need to be signed off by the Secretary of State, so no easy undertaking, would take you all the way back inland towards Wainfleet and then have you bring all the way back out again in the opposite direction. I don't know the total length, but it's quite a considerable distance. 5 miles, Andrew tells me.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you. Sorry to keep going, but just on the paying of on the cost of it, I did read the previous papers from pre-COVID times when we were gonna, you know, when this was started, and it suggested in there, and I may have this wrong, that then there was a requirement for 25% contribution by the county. Can you just confirm that's gone, and you know, we're going to get all of this cost back?
Yeah, that pertains to the management of the route going forward. The establishment works required for the route are 100% funded. But going forward, we have to find 25% as part of the national funding formula. That's already in budget and has been set. So we've got that going forward anyway. So we put in 25% naturally and put in 75% of the amount that we're entitled to based on length, character of the route, how much of it is on an existing highway, and so on. It's a national funding formula for all national trails.
But in the end, we get the 25% back. Is that right?
No, we wouldn't get that 25%
No,
back.
so it is going to cost us something. Okay. Thank you for that. And I think the final thing was I've got a bad knee at the moment, and I've had for many months. But I have been a keen sort of coastal walker, and I've done quite a lot of the. I have to say, not always the entire lengths. You know, done them in sections around the country. And I'm ashamed to say Lincolnshire is about the only coast I haven't sort of walked in any length at all. So I think the question really is, how will it be promoted? I think it's a marvellous thing. I'll be supporting it as much as I possibly can. But I just think the promotion of it, and obviously it's a tourism aspect. We want to attract people to come to Lincolnshire and walk our coast. How will we be promoting it?
Thank you. It is one of the expectations within the funding formula. That's part of the role of the Access Authority within its management of the route, which we contribute that 25% for. Obviously, we work very closely with Visit Lincolnshire and our own internal tourism colleagues on that, but also there's a national programme, so it sits in with that National Trails family that I mentioned earlier. So we work on that as all access authorities on the England Coast Path do all the way around the country, feed into the website on that, and then it's promoted also through the walking organisations as well. So the officer that we have looking after this route, that will be part of their role, will be to advocate for the route both locally and nationally.
Thank you, Councillor Dilks. Thank you, Chris, for all those answers. Over to Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. Like Councillor Dilks, I welcome this path. Basically, any sort of like tourism to Lincolnshire and Skegness in particular is a plus for me. But I do have a couple of concerns. The first one is I'm the member for Skegness South, and it says on there that the member has been consulted. Unfortunately, I haven't on this occasion. I'm assuming it was an oversight. Also, regarding National England, what would happen if for some reason they pulled out during the middle of the consultation? Would LCC be left to finish the bridge under financial and public pressure? Do we have a backup plan as well, just in that case? So, and also, for me, I welcome the project, but it does seem a little bit too good to be true. So I'm a little cautious. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks, and apologies if there was an oversight in not making contact. That wouldn't normally be our aim, obviously. We try and keep our local members involved across everything we try and do. In terms of that risk, in discussions even with Natural England yesterday at the National Programme Board, I highlighted the issue that there were potential problems going forward in that programme, that we as an authority would not put ourselves forward at any financial risk. So at that point, basically, as I put it to them, was we basically down tools, and it becomes Natural England's issue to then resolve going forward, because we wouldn't want to be putting this authority to any financial pressure. Because of the way that the government funding is set out, there are no guarantees beyond the 31st of March. We have a guaranteed legal agreement with Natural England to fund the full installation of the bridge if we can do it within the financial year. Obviously, if there are issues regarding the weather, we are constrained to construction during the winter because of its location and the nature of the site around Gibraltar Point. So as a consequence, we have to build in an element of that risk in terms of that programme extension, for which beyond the 31st of March there are no guarantees. But at that point we have said, well, if there's no agreement with DEFRA at that point, then we would just basically say we can't progress any further.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Davis.
Good morning. Yeah, thank you for the report. I think it's a great idea. I just wanted to get some clarity about costs. So the price is now circa 1.8 million. Has that... I've got a few questions, Mr. Chairman. Should we do them stop and start? Is that all right?
That's fine. How many? As many as Councillor Dilks, or just a few?
Not as many as Councillor.
Okay, that's
Mine
fine.
are better questions as well.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, Richard.
Thank
Yeah. If you keep going on, I'll stop you.
Yeah, thank you. 1.8 is the final total. Has that figure been agreed with Natural England?
Natural England are aware of that. That is the working total at the moment. Obviously, we're still elements of design. We've not put a spade in the ground, so anything we discover under the ground might change the programme. But that's the indicative cost we've been given, yes. And Natural England are aware of that.
But by aware, that's the figure they're prepared to underwrite?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. They're 100% of the installation of the bridge.
If we did pull out now, what would that... You talk about abortive cost, but it's not clear from the paper what the abortive cost is.
So we've already been having to progress this programme. Obviously, we've now reached a level where it's become a key decision, and hence the need for the report. But if we determine as an authority not to proceed with no other reason we don't want the financial risk potentially, the Natural England will say that was potentially a breach of our agreement. They haven't given me a conclusive answer, but they have said there is the potential for abortive costs of things like they've already paid for the construction of the bridge. That's already been fabricated. It's away being painted. So something like that, they'll say, well, if you're not delivering it now, why have we paid for it? So there are those potential abortive costs. They are actually listed in the resources comments to the paper.
Thank you. That was useful. It also uses a slightly innocuous phrase, illegible for reclaim in the report. I just wonder, have we spent anything that isn't eligible for reclaim as part of this?
No, but obviously at the moment we're still working within the programme. If there was abortive costs, then those would be the ineligible bits.
That would fall into eligible. And then my final point is, I think, if I'm reading the report correctly, for 5 years you've outlined the maintenance period. Is it the authority's decision point to maintain it in perpetuity after that? And if so, what do those costs look like?
Again, at the moment, we have the budget going forward. It's written into our budget for the service as part of that the general management of the England Coast Path. So it's 5 years for all the establishments we do, all the way from Tetney down to Sutton Bridge, and the bridge would obviously be part of that. Obviously, with being a structure of this type, the design life should be that there is plenty of scope within that. Beyond that 5 years, we have no legal liability. I believe that's right, isn't it? So we have no legal liability beyond that 5 years, but that's part of the agreement for that fund, that 100% funding, that we will pick that up. But again, 75% that's covered as well.
And my final question, if I may, Mr. Chairman, should somebody from the East Midlands manage to get this put on the definitive right-of-way map, would we then become liable for the bridge?
That wouldn't happen because it is, I'll get this right, it's by right, as opposed to as of right, the usage. Right. So it wouldn't be something you could claim. They would have to have claimed the original bridge was in public usage, which it wasn't, and it hasn't been.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you for your report, which was very interesting. Like others, I do welcome this project and think that it has a lot of benefits to come for Lincolnshire as a whole. The points I'd like to make have been raised a little, but I'd like to delve further into them. You've obviously mentioned, and I think we can all agree, that sort of there is a very minimal risk of not receiving money owed from reimbursement, but I do think that risk is still there. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, and I'd like to ask about what you're doing to ensure timely reimbursement of costs and what timescales are there. I do have a couple of other points that I'm happy to combine, or whichever you prefer. Yeah.
Yeah, so the process enables us, every time we have an expenditure, so for example, now that we've had the bridge fabricated, we've claimed that cost. That was signed off this week, that's gone through our payment system, that's already gone to Natural England, so within the space of a week of the sign off of that invoice. So we can stage it, so at no point should we be holding any kind of cost to it within the envelope of the funding grant within this financial year. As stated, the issue is at the end of the financial year where there is no onward agreement. If we've delivered the bridge within that time frame, we have the grants there to fund that. It's only if we have this a force majeure event, the weather for it being the main one, which pushes that programme beyond the end of the financial year.
Thank you. Do we have risk mitigation in place for that? Because let's be honest, sort of with the timescales looking at sort of January to March 26, this is not very far away, and I think that timescale is quite ambitious at best. So I think there should be something built in to protect our finances after that period were it to extend.
Sure. Well, basically the risk mitigation is we stop. And we don't incur any further expenditure, and any expenditure we do from having stopped it, and if there's anything we have to keep paying for because there's temporary works on site still or anything like that, it's been made clear to Natural England that they are responsible for that because it's not part of what we can deliver at that point.
And if I may continue, thank you, Chairman. I note that obviously in terms of the 25% maintenance funding, is there any risk in future years from budget allocation from our side of things? I know that you've mentioned it's in place at the moment, but obviously that is an ongoing risk, particularly with change of administration and whatnot. You don't know sort of where priorities may lay in future. And I'd like to be assured that we're not going to spend money on a project that we can't properly maintain for the benefit of the future, because it would be crazy now to spend this money and then not be able to maintain it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, there is a little bit of crystal ball gazing, I guess, in that regard. Yes, the budget is set within our service at the minute. It's £25,000, which then unlocks about 130, I think it is in total. Is it something along those lines? In ballpark, for the management on a year-on-year basis, we would receive that. So it's what we would consider to be reasonably good gearing in terms of the outlay that we make. Should we not have that 25%, or again, should that funding formula change, or should funding for all national trails be withdrawn by the government, then, like all other national trails, we would then have to reconsider our position about what we undertake. For the first 5 years, we obviously have that obligation to keep looking after it, but beyond that, we wouldn't anyway. So it would just be, if there was a problem with the route, it would just have to be closed. So, but that's at Natural England's and then the government's risk rather than ours.
Chairman, I have one more with your light indulgence. Thank you very much indeed. Just under procurement, I am a little surprised that there hasn't been a competitive tender process and that you have, and I understand the reasons why, but I wondered if you perhaps would elaborate on that slightly more. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much for the question. The procurement for... Is it working? Yeah, you are. Okay. The procurement for the foundations of the bridge was intended to go through the term contractor, which had already been through a procurement exercise when it was first let. The rest of the procurement, for example, the bridge, has already gone through a competitive tender.
Have you got another one, Councillor
It's a
Vernon?
supplementary to the
That's
one
fine.
that I've just answered. Obviously, I can appreciate what you're saying about the foundations of the bridge, but in terms of the next stage, on page 23, it states sort of obviously that the alternative option was to seek competitive quotes through an existing framework agreement, and that had already gone a competitive tender exercise through the other framework. So does that apply to both sections then?
I do apologize. What sections? Sorry, I didn't quite understand your question there.
Sorry, so obviously you've got the approach to use the existing LCC contract with Balfour Beatty, but the alternative option was to seek competitive quotes through the existing framework. And whilst I can see that that would lead to additional time in construction timetable, there were obviously benefits to that. So I was keen to understand why that didn't happen at that stage. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it was one of the options that we put through to Natural England as the funding body as to which they would prefer to do, and they selected to go for the first option, which was to go through our contractor rather than push it through a framework agreement. So we didn't undertake that at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Thank you, Andrew Fletcher. Councillor Parkinson.
Just to follow up on that point, so we've asked Natural England which option they'd prefer, but we're paying the £1.8 million up front. So why is it their decision and not our decision?
Ultimately, they're paying for it. It's their money we are spending, albeit that we have to spend it first and then claw it back. So the rationale for the decision on the procurement was mainly down to the speed of delivery. Natural England have a programme for this route to be open around the nation by next year. If going into an extended procurement process would have put this bridge potentially at the back end of next year, and it's too big a piece of infrastructure in the wider scheme of the path to take too many delays on it. So they wanted the speediest route through, and that was to use our existing term maintenance contract for highways, who, to be fair, do most of the work on the public rights way network for bridges of a similar type, albeit not of this size.
Brilliant, thank you. The other question as well, within the report, it mentions that if costs come in significantly more, that the liability falls with Natural England. So what is significantly more? Where do we draw the line, as in, what's that number?
Yeah, I can't give you that answer because that would be down to Natural England really as to what they consider is significantly more, because they are the funding body. We will spend the allocated grant. Once the allocated grant is expended, then we have no further obligation to proceed because it's 100% funded. That's the agreement. So that, again, we're not putting ourselves at any financial risk in doing so.
But it would mean that if the risk, say it's another £200,000, if we say we're not funding it, then the project doesn't happen, effectively.
And again, that is at Natural England and DEFRA's risk.
I would expect, given the past record, that during that building process, you are going to find something that's going to cost more money. That tends to be what happens. So we're effectively saying there's a fair chance that this doesn't happen if that's the stance.
I guess that is a risk. That's undeniable. There is an element of risk built into that programme fund, and Natural England have agreed that. I think it's about 15%? 20% risk on that. So it would have to take it beyond that level of risk already. But again, this is not our project. This is a national project. And as such, the decisions are made at a national level as to what they do. They have asked us to keep building. Yesterday, when I asked for a steer, it was, please keep delivery on track as best you can. We will keep funding within this financial envelope and within this financial year.
So in that scenario, then, if we then do have to fund more work at that point, so that will have to come back, I'm assuming, to the portfolio holder then, would it, at that point, to make that decision?
Yes, it would. And ultimately, we wouldn't make that expenditure without a further legal agreement, because our legal agreements are based on the levels of funding. So if we determine that, for whatever reason, there is further cost beyond what we've already outlined, we would have to have a legal agreement in place with Natural England before we actually made that expenditure. Without that legal agreement with them to say, yes, we will cover the funding, we're not going to carry on.
Okay, fine. And this is more a question really for Dem. So if in this scenario that has to come back to us for additional funding, does that decision go through scrutiny, or if it's less than the 500,000, does it just become a portfolio decision?
Over to
Do you want
Andrew.
me to try and answer that? Yeah. So I think probably the route that we take is if we were still in a position where we were forward funding that next tranche of work, if it breached a further key decision above the figure, and we're going to look at Nigel for him to nod at me, we'd probably seek to bring it back, yeah. But if it was under that, there's other mechanisms within the Constitution to work with variances. Clearly, we'd potentially probably be reporting these through the monitoring process as well, through the finance report. So that'd be the route that we typically take. Projects do have variances in them, but we would seek to try and, yeah, if those key decisions were breached, we'd seek to try and do something. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew. I have a question. Very rare. Moving forward, the coast sometimes has floods or storms. If the bridge is damaged at any point in the future, who's responsible for it, and is it insured?
So on that, similar with, again, with all the national trails where there is what they would deem a catastrophic, I can't say the word, catastrophic event, such as a landslip, so where the route runs alongside a cliff, they have what's called rollback, so the path moves and they don't replace it. That would be, again, a decision for DEFRA and Natural England about what they do should this bridge, for whatever reason, become unusable. Their alternative is to invoke part of the Marine and Coastal Access Act, get that right eventually, Marine and Coastal Access Act, which allows them to realign the route. So whilst it wouldn't be their first choice to have a lined 5-mile detour, that's what they could move to. So again, there would be no obligation on repair necessarily. If any repairs were necessary, that would have to come out of the national funding.
Right, thank you, Chris. Any further questions? Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. I'm definitely going to support the recommendations of the report. I think it's quite hard to say no to a free bridge. But onto a part which says when each stretch is opened, the public management will be through partnership arrangements, and that's when we foot our 25% maintenance share. I'm kind of curious to see what is considered open, or how is that conclusion drawn, and is a loose definition of open, does that potentially mean we could be paying earlier? Because as I think we've already celebrated the opening of the King Charles III Trail a few months ago. And when we do foot the 25% maintenance arrangement, what kind of inspections of the designs and the maintenance costs have been taken to ensure we know exactly what we're getting into and that we're not just taking Natural England's words for it?
I'll deal with the first bit, and then might have to come back to the second bit for a bit more clarity. But with regards to the first bit, that partnership arrangement and the opening of the stretches. So the partnership, we are classed as a Greater Lincolnshire stretch, so our partnership includes the other two constituent unitary authorities to the north. Amongst others, it will include the district. It's not set up yet because the whole stretch between Humber to Sutton Bridge isn't fully open because of this one stretch. The way that the Natural England and DEFRA have approached it is every individual stretch is broken down into pieces, and it's those that have opened. So you were referring to the opening that was held up near Mablethorpe for the stretch up to our county boundary that Councillor Robinson attended in May. That was for the opening of the bit from Skegness North, so that bit was known as, well, it was actually Mablethorpe to Humber Bridge. That was the stretch being open. So bits are being opened, but the actual opening of the route as a whole nationally, there's still some sections that are being determined even at the moment, the Isle of Wight being the main one. So that's how that bit's been operating. With the second, can you just run that through me again? I want to make sure I understand it properly.
So yeah, once the bridge is finished and everything, we're going to be maintaining it, the council, 25% of the costs. So what have we done to ensure that their designs are kind of cost effective for us, essentially, is the question.
Okay, so my question back, if I may, is the designs for the infrastructure? The bridge, okay. we do all the design work. That's part and parcel of the delivery of the programme. So that's been done by the technical experts in the delivery of bridges of this sort. That's signed off by us. Natural England have seen it. So yeah, we would treat it. We are basically treating it like any other piece of highway infrastructure, which includes public rights-of-way work. So we're just treating it the same as that. So it was built to our design standards.
Thank you, Chris. Any further questions? Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion for this item. I move that the board supports the recommendation to the Executive Councillors as detailed on page 19 of the report, and ask that our comments captured by the Scrutiny Officer will be shared with the Executive Councillors for their consideration ahead of the decision on the 20th of October 2025. Do I have a seconder? So Brooks. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions? I believe that to be agreed. On to item 8. Treasury Management Performance 2025-26, Quarter 1 to 30th June 2025. Excuse me. The next scrutiny report can be found on pages 31 to 58 of the agenda pack. This report presents the Council's Treasury Management Performance for the first quarter of the 2025-26 financial year, as required by the CIPFA Code of Practice. It compares actual management activities with the approved Treasury Management Strategy and highlights any issues that arose during the period. Actions: that the members of the Overview and Scrutiny Management Board review and comment on the contents of the report, and that comments be passed on to the Executive Councillor for Resources. This report will be presented by Karen Tong, Treasury Manager. Over to you, Mrs. Tong.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, everyone. As just been said, this compares Treasury Management activity in the Quarter 1 to the strategy that was prepared in February 2025 for 25-26 year. The report is broken down into usual 3 main areas, starting with interest rates and economy, investments, and then borrowing. So starting with interest rates in the economic review, a more detailed commentary on that can be found in Appendix A on page 39 from our Treasury Advisors MUFG. But to summarise, growth over the quarter has remained subdued and is expected to be modest for the year. In reality, this is what's bearing fruition, with estimates of just over 1% for this year in growth. Short-term interest rates movement is going to be impacted by inflation, and so for the fall in interest rates has followed what was in the strategy, where we've had 2 cuts. It's been cut from 4.5% at the start of the year, and actually it was cut in August to 4%. The markets are not expecting the next cut till February-March time next year, as inflation is still remains to be sticky and was in fact held at 3.8% this week. And the Bank of England has held rates at 4% level just recently too. Long-term rates have increased extensively to those forecast in the strategy, mainly due to the gilt issuance factor, where the government is issuing a large amount of gilts, which affects the supply and then it increases the yields on those gilts, which our borrowing rates are based on. The forecasts of the borrowing rates now are 50.5% higher than what was in the strategy, but they're still forecast to fall moderately by over the next 3 years or so. But current levels are running between 4.9% and 6.25%. Hence the advice to borrow short and leave as long as possible the decision to borrow if we have to. But I'll move on to borrowing in 1 second. Moving to investments first, though, a detailed analysis of investments can be seen on Appendix B, page 45 of your pack. And it shows the balance of investments at the end of the quarter was 244 million. To give you an example today, it's 184 million. So this balance fluctuates every day depending on our cash flow. As capital spending is forecast to increase towards the end of the year, these balances usually fall by the year end. If there's no underspend levels on the capital programmes and the revenue programmes, balances are expected to be about 130 million towards the end of the financial year. If you look at the graph on the appendix, on the top left, you'll see that the investment return on these investments has remained fairly level, despite a falling interest rate environment, and this has been done by investing strategically during the quarter to lock into rates of interest fixed for different periods. And the average length of our maturity is 114 days at the end of June. I'm pleased to say that we've outperformed the SONIA benchmark quite significantly by 0.66% for the quarter. And also other benchmark comparators provided by the MUFG benchmarking group by some margin. If you want to show a breakdown of our investments, this is covered in Appendix C and D of the pack, which also shows our current authorised lending list, set according to the creditworthiness of the counterparties on that list. Investments in our money market funds are used for maintaining liquidity on our cash flow. And at the end of June, this level was just under 60 million, and it's 34 million today. Moving finally to borrowing, again, a detailed analysis of the borrowing can be shown on page 57 in Appendix E of the pack. And it shows the detail of the borrowing over the quarter and also the latest maturity profile of our debt. Our long-term borrowing started the year at 449 million and at 30th of June was just over 443 million. The borrowing requirement for 25-26 was 69.5, but with carry forwards brought forward to underspend from the previous year and other changes, it now stands at 95.6 million. At the end of June, quarter one. To maintain a liquidity position of around 100 million, it's forecast that we have to externally borrow 22.9 million of this new requirement for this year. But this is on the premise that our capital programme is fully spent, and I already know there's been a slippage of 8 million in the quarter. So this figure will likely to be changed, if not removed completely, if there's any underspends as well. And 6.3 million of debt is due to mature in 25-26. So that's a summary of the borrowing. I'll just note that the Treasury Management training was offered to members last week in line with the Treasury Management Knowledge and Skills Framework. Attendance was fairly low, and so as it's a mandatory requirement, we'll be offering another session at the end of October, but on Teams this time to make it more accessible if that's more helpful. And we'll be liaising with Democratic Services to arrange a suitable date for you all. So that's all my comments, and I just welcome any questions. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Karen. Any questions? Councillor Davis.
Thank you. I continue to find your reports interesting, although quite heavy going, particularly having dug into it. Congratulations on the SONIA comparison, actually. That was quite an achievement. I didn't realise how rare that is, so I think we should take a moment to recognise that's quite an achievement. A couple of quick questions, really. How sensitive are we to the Public Works Loan Board intermediary rate changes, should they decide to, in lieu of the national finances? Do you model that at all in terms of sensitivity? And my second question is, and I think you've picked it up in your liquidity point in terms of your borrowing requirement, I'm guessing for things like the DSG overspend, we're not in a kind of a cash negative position. That's why you're bringing in that borrowing. But if you could confirm that, I'd be grateful.
Yeah, thank you. We are particularly sensitive to PWB changes, that they can change their rates overnight with no notice, and they have been known to do that in the past. We don't do any modelling because we're trying to not, we haven't had a borrowing requirement in the last several years to externally borrow. We've kept it internally borrowed, so no modelling has been done. But if it turns out that we're probably likely to have to, we're at the mercy of whatever the rates are at that time. To be fair, so. What was your second? Oh, yes, sorry. Well, the DSG deficit, I don't think we have one for 25-26, but it will be part of the cash flow the management that we do in total. We don't just focus on one, but I wasn't aware. I don't know if Andrew's aware of the actual position.
Yeah, I will come in, Chair, if that's okay. Yeah, so as we had in the Q1 report, you've seen it is starting to move into deficit now, and we'll have a formally, I guess, declared deficit by the end of the financial year. So it is a consideration that we will have to play into our liquidity management, as you rightly identify, amongst other things such as the external capital programme, which far outweighs that requirement at the moment, but will become a growing issue, is a lot bigger issue for other councils, as you've heard previously as well, some of whom are now starting to consider firmer measures such as Section 114 issues, because that Treasury budget is so widely stretched.
Yes.
Just on the loan rate issue, I mean, it wouldn't be beyond the realms of possibility if you look back over 25 years to see a 1, 2 or 3% fluctuation in that core rate. Would it be worth almost wargaming it? Perhaps, probably not in public, but somebody somewhere rattling through and thinking, okay, you guys put together medium-term, top-level and RAG-rated responses on other things. I just wondered whether internally that might be a process that would give you and the decision makers some surety about risk outcome, because it wouldn't take much, as you rightly say. I think they do it twice a year, I believe, but theoretically they could do it at any point. And I don't know what our exposure, what that would look like, at 2%. Our own domestic interest rates have varied by more than that over the last few years. So I just wondered, I posit the question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Richard. Karen?
Yeah, the rates from the PWB stem from gilt rates, and then they put a margin on those gilt rates of 0.8% that we can borrow at. So it's relatively cheap and near enough government level that we're borrowing at. And the different rates for over different periods are really coming from those gilt rates, and those gilt rates are influenced by the issuance in particular periods. We do have our Treasury advisors, MUFG, that advises on economic forecasts and stuff, and try and predict what these levels are going to be and set target rates for borrowing and so forth. So to that extent we are sort of looking at different rates and trying to mitigate the risk and so forth. But the PWB haven't altered that margin for a while now, but that's what they've been known to do in the past, to dictate our appetite for borrowing from them. But they haven't done that for a while, and that's what they could do overnight. But the rates change every day depending on the market and the gilts and inflation and so forth.
Andrew?
And just as a matter of emphasis to that, how that plays through into the preparation of the revenue budget is we do use those forecasts to work out what the best interest paid part of the capital financing budget is based on that. But naturally, we always try and strengthen our process. I like the idea of the sensitivity analysis and how we might play that into future budgetary debates with you. But in recent years, I think we talked about it back in June when we brought the year-end finance report through. We have benefited from changes in those rates and indeed not borrowing by getting underspends on the interest paid budget, which we've been used to be able to set aside voluntary repayment provision and early repayment of debt. So a bit of a circular issue with it. But yeah, we'll take that on board.
Thanks, Andrew. Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Karen, for the report. The debt is projected to reach 465 million by March next year. I know we already use internal borrowing, but have we considered reducing investment balances further to offset the borrowing, since returns are lower than the debt cost? And if not, why not? And also, as per Councillor Davis, I'd like to see more sort of like data from like 5 years ago to now, and then a projected for the next 2 to 3 years on investments, if possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
We're getting to the stage now where our investment balances are getting to the minimum required for managing liquidity and cash flow, to be fair. So we've strategically borrowed internally over the last 2 or 3 years, to be fair, to bring that down to that level. So it's getting to the point now where that's not going to be an option going forward, and it just depends. The actual borrowing requirement will depend on the level of the capital programme that's set, and the whether other method of funding is available for the priorities that are agreed on the capital funding. So as I said in the report, to maintain that 100 million level, we're possibly going to have to borrow 22 million of that 95 million borrowing requirement for this year. So, the remainder is going to be internal again for 25-26, but and that might change if the capital programme slips or there's underspends. That will be wiped out again, but we can't continually do that as our investment balances fall. So it's going to, be a decision on the borrowing requirements that are set in future years to come, and how we, fund those.
And just regarding the data analysis from 5 years to now and then to the next 3 years, is that possible?
Data analysis for investment balances, was that? Well, we can certainly pull investment balances for you and let you know those. Obviously, projected is subject to estimation, but yeah, certainly that can be available.
Thank you, Karen. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Karen. I do have a question. I don't know if it's so much directed at yourself, Karen, or whether Andrew, but can you tell us what the difference is between external borrowing and capital financing requirement, and how this impacts on the budget set in February of this year, please?
Sure, certainly. I know it's a technical area and there's a lot of jargon involved, but the capital financing requirement is our underlying need to finance our capital programme by borrowing, and that's because that's the balancing of the capital programme less any other funding we've got for that programme. So, for instance, grants and contributions, capital receipts, what you fund through revenue and so forth. If that's taken off your capital programme, and anything else that could be funded in a different way, and the remainder is the borrowing requirement, which is your capital financing requirement, and that borrowing requirement adds to the capital financing requirement every year, and MRP reduces the capital financing requirement every year. So our balance of capital financing requirement as it stands at the start of the year was 700 million, and that's reflected by past borrowing requirements over previous years to this date, less our MRP, minimum revenue provision, MRP. So that borrowing requirement can be met either internally or externally. We've got a choice there. And in the past several years, we've chosen to meet whatever borrowing requirement we end up with to meet that internally. So we're using our own cash balances to fund that programme. But external borrowing, our external borrowing balance of 443 million, That's what we've actually physically borrowed from the market, predominantly PWLB, Public Works Loan Board. So that's actual debt that we have. So our internal borrowing position is about 300 million, 250 million, to make up the 700 of your capital financing requirement. So that capital financing requirement is committed borrowing requirement from previous capital expenditure and programme decisions. Have I answered everything, or was there something else? I can't remember.
Andrew, would you like to?
I'll add, because there was a further bit of the question. I think it's probably important to say as well that internal borrowing doesn't last forever either, does it? Because you are at mercy at the strength of your balance sheet, the reserves you've got available, etc. So I think in terms of what Karen's saying is, we've borrowed 443 million to date, but based on past decisions, that would ultimately rise to a potential of up to 700 million. It might never ever reach 700 million because we'll always have cash balances available to us, unless they essentially zero. But as well, the second part of your question, Councillor Findlay, was the budget in February. So the council has had a policy in recent years through its capital strategy of setting a 10-year capital programme, and the latest figures, as reported into the executive Q1 at the start of September, was that 10-year capital programme. It's over £700 million, but the council in February committed to that programme, and that is predicated on external borrowing over some point in the future of about £330 million. So that would add on to the 700 million that at some point that Karen refers to. There are then ways that figure can change, and Karen touched upon them. So there's things like selling assets that generate capital receipts. There are things that we've already seen both the old council and the new council make in terms of decisions in terms of setting aside voluntary repayments of debt. But also as well, there are political decisions that can be made at a future council meeting that would change the shape of that capital programme. So that might mean reducing it, it might mean identifying alternative ways of funding it, and that might include changing from borrowing to revenue contributions, for example, but that needs decisions to be made in the revenue budget, amongst other things as well. So, so that external borrowing of £330 million to come in future was set in February, but future council meetings, i.e., for example, the budget meeting in February that we've got coming up, could change the shape of that. But that's the position as it stands at the moment. I hope that's clear.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you, Andrew. So, sorry, so there's 330 million additional borrowing requirement. Where's the 700 million coming from, sorry?
So over the next 10 years, the budget that was set by the council in February has, over that 10-year period, a capital programme of over £700 million. That includes things like the North Highcombe Relief Road, items for Spalding Western Relief Road in there, and various other elements of capital expenditure that we would expect to expense, whether that's looking after the fire fleet, office buildings, special schools, the SEND hubs, for example. All of those were part of that budget. As I said, about £330 million of it is forecast to be externally borrowed. There's over £200 million of external grants and contributions in play, over £100 million of revenue contributions that fund that capital programme, as well as, I think, off the top of my head, because it's be about £5 million a year, capital receipts of about £50 million. So a big mix of funding. But that was the budget as set in February.
Okay, fine, makes sense. My other question as well is that obviously gilt yields are quite a big part of what we do, and it's something we have to be aware of. But you've got two issues with gilts at the moment. You've got cutting rates into rising inflation, which is obviously causes issues in the gilt markets. But you've also got the slowdown in QE as well from the Bank of England. So you've got effectively two factors that are going to continue to drive gilt yields up. And when things start heading in the wrong direction, they get pretty ugly in a hurry, don't they? So how exposed could we potentially be if gilt yields hit 6-7%, for example?
Yeah, we are exposed in a rising market, but the risk of that we mitigate by borrowing as short as possible, because gilt yields in the shorter end, up to 5 years, are a lot lower than long term. So if we did have to take any external borrowing, this year, it would be in the short end of the curve, and also as late as possible. So I wouldn't be expecting to do anything until the latter part of March, and at that time we will be getting outturn figures that will probably take away the issue for this financial year. But it's all about seeing which way interest rates are moving, and borrowing short or long accordingly is the best, is the only way you can mitigate that risk of spikes.
Okay, fine.
And so forth.
I've got another question around the investment list. So who is setting that investment list? Who is the decision maker around who we're investing in?
That investment list is set by the council. It's authorised lending list, and it's approved by the executive councillor every year, and it's formulated in accordance to our risk profile, and we base that risk profile on credit ratings and credit rating methodology from our treasury advisors that we receive. So every counterparty on that list has its own credit rating, long-term, short-term, in the market, and we have minimum credit rating levels that we will lend to. So if you look at Appendix C, Appendix C of the report, that shows the credit ratings in columns there. Of those, our minimum rating is A+. We won't lend to anyone that's got a rating lower than that. They also determine the amount that we'll lend to counterparties as well. Double A's will be lending to 20 million, 25 million maximum, and it goes down from there. So that sets, that determines who gets on that list, and also the amount and the duration that we'll lend to them as well.
So do we look beyond the credit rating, as in do we assess the financial situation of some of those councils? Because when you look at the state of some of those councils, there's quite a few that are on the brink of literally going bust at the moment.
Oh, right. Well, councils on the list aren't credit rated. We don't have to have credit ratings for local government, because we are government, tier one risk, basically. So not many are credit rated, but we do have a list that we won't lend to as councils if they have posted that they are in trouble, or have posted Section 114s or things like that. So it's not written down anywhere, but there is a list that we won't do for reputational or association reasons.
Okay, so I've looked into some of these councils. So I'll give you a few examples. So the leader of Basildon Council has described their situation as a dire financial situation that they're currently in. You've got Dorset County Council that have just sacked 11 officers over contracts fraud and are facing a £30 million budget deficit this year. You've got Bedford Borough Council currently being investigated by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, and they're also facing an overspend this year that will completely deplete all of their reserve. The leader of the opposition has said they're effectively bankrupt as a council. You've got Gloucester City Council, whose new leadership team has said that the previous administration failed to deliver any sort of audited accounts and have left the finances in chaos. They've also stopped all discretionary spending at Gloucester City Council. You've got five council facing a £17 million black hole this year as well. Lots of these councils are in a horrific financial situation. They are not safe investments by any stretch. Some of these councils are going to have to make some really, really difficult spending decisions really, really quickly. That presents us with quite a significant risk if those councils are in a position to give us that money back.
Yeah, that's not credit risk, though. A council is not able to go bankrupt. I don't know. It's not credit risk, and they still represent the highest credit on the list compared to banks, because there's no danger of us not getting our money back from these investments. So it's just association risk, really, and reputational risk that you're mentioning there.
Andrew.
I'll just add to Karen's points, really. I guess so. Notwithstanding some of the things that you've mentioned there, Councillor Parkinson, about some of the councils, clearly there's there's timing issues of that. So when we've lent money, those comments might not have been made, or those reviews might not have been in place. I'd also urge caution around statements that might be used by certain councils for political posturing, because you can use the trade press to make a particular point about your funding position, not least when you're in the middle of a fair funding review. So maybe some of those I'd take with a potential pinch of salt. And I think just to build on what Karen said, so there's a soft and a hard version of this. The hard version is, as Karen says, councils can't go bust. If a council declares itself bankrupt, as you quoted some of those, we're claiming that they might be bankrupt, a payment of interest and principal back to this council would class as a contractual payment. And one of the key mechanisms of a Section 114 notice, i.e. the council bankruptcy, is whilst you can't enter into any new payment arrangements with a council, any existing payment arrangements that you have in place, you are liable to pay. So that forms part of a council's response to a situation like that. I think the softer side of it is, as Karen says, is we've always taken a view, is at the point we are working with the local authority into lending market, we will take that view. So again, cutting through the potential politics of it in terms of statements that might be made, we will look at, at how the council is actually performing rather than maybe what is being said about it as well. But notwithstanding, as you say, there are some issues that you flagged there. But in terms of providing assurance to the committee, any money that we've got out with local government will come back to this council.
Thank you, Andrew. Any further questions? I've got some questions. Just for clarification here, the money that we borrow, is it on a repayment basis or interest only? Because we've got maturing 6.304 million in 25-26. Does that mean we have to find that because we're on interest only, or is that basically means we've no longer got to pay that sum? Thank you.
Yeah, we borrow on a maturity basis, predominantly from the PWLB, and that is effectively interest only throughout the course of the loan, and then you repay the actual loan when it matures. So that gives us our maturity profile. If you have a look on Appendix E of that profile, those are the maturities of the loans as they fall, and we aim to we do it that way to aim to smooth the maturity profile, so that we have an even, as much as possible, profile of maturing debt over the years, so you're not liable to refinancing risk when you have to, at the time that those loans mature. It is effectively interest.
Thank you. It's interest only. That's what I thought. Right. Yeah. Later on, we was looking at the map. 57, I think it was. We're paying back about 50 million in 1 year. So my concern is, being a financial advisor, a mortgage broker, is if I was saying to a client who is borrowing on interest only, having all your maturities come at a certain time is a very dangerous thing to do, because quite simply you are going to have to, you're basically kicking the can down. That's what you're doing. Having to find lump sums here and there when the maturities happen is not always the best course of action. I see what you could do is refinance it and do it again, but that is something I think everybody needs to understand, because it's not like a repayment mortgage on a house when at the end of the maturity the debt's gone. You're basically continually kicking the can down, and that debt gets higher and higher and higher and is never repaid until it actually comes up for maturity. Is that the case, Karen?
No.
Okay, right, okay.
We have an indicator to follow that we don't repay more than 10% of the total debt in any 1 year. That's a target when we're thinking about how long to borrow for. The maximum in those years you referred to in 2056, 57, we're paying just over 35 million in a couple of those years, and that looks like a peak in that time because it reflects the interest rate that we had at the time we took that borrowing, because that was 50-year debt when interest rates went below 2%. So we filled our boots, as it were.
Halcyon days, Karen.
Yeah, and that's why that's showing the peak. But really, we are managing our maturities manually by, picking the length that we borrow at for whatever reason, at whatever rates, and making sure that we don't exceed 10% in any one year.
Okay, so
we're
that's
managing it that
10%.
way.
So there's no year where we've got 10% of our debt. What concerns me a bit is it sounds like we're going to be, in the next 10 years, owing 700 million, all of which is interest only and all of which has to be paid back at some point. But thanks for explaining that. Am I right in thinking that since the change of administration that we've had a drop in our debt by 6 million? Is that correct? About 6 million?
Yeah, we're forecast to repay 6.3 million of the year, and we've nearly repaid that already. That's matured this year.
That's great. And that will be from, and this is when you look at the interest you get from lending to other councils, to what the gilt rates are and what we're going to borrow at, and decide whether we do internal borrowing, which is use our own money to pay it off rather than actually borrowing at high gilt rates. That's great. Another question, interesting question. The 223 million we've got in savings, how have we generated that over the years? Is that just basically just gradually saving and being a good council, or how have we generated that over the years?
223 million investments you're referring to, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, investments are made up of our cash balances at any one point in time. So, they're made up of money flowing into the council and flowing out. It's made up of working capital, any reserves, that sort of stuff, that sort of thing. So, the cash flow impacts on that level of investments at any time. So.
Thank you. And last question, how's LGR going to affect the money, and when we finally become a unitary, does the money from EDLC and the rest of the district councils all come into one? Are they ring-fenced? How is it going to work?
Oh, I don't know. It'll all be part of a plan, won't it? We'll have to determine what our balances are. We'll have to make sure we know what is on our balance sheet, all our reserves and things. And then I imagine whoever we'll be merging with will, ring-fence the investment portfolios and the debt portfolios and your balance sheet items at that time. But that'll be interesting exercise.
Do we actually? Sorry, Andrew, you go ahead.
Okay. Just to add to what Karen said, as you're aware, we have to submit a business case to the government on by the 28th of November, and obviously we're meeting here at the end of November and in the council meeting to submit and debate that. Part of that business case is a financial case, and we're working on that at the moment. So we're looking quite in depth at the different assets and liabilities of all of the different councils that make up the geography of Lincolnshire. One of the live things that we're starting to work through now, and we'll be bringing Karen and her team into that, is the assets, borrowing liabilities of those different councils. We know that districts have borrowings, so different districts have historic housing revenue account debt, for example, so that would increase whatever the final council makeup is by those amounts, but also as well they do have assets as well, investment properties, etc., etc. So a whole array of things that would need to be brought together in whatever the final makeup of the council or councils covering Lincolnshire would be, but to be determined. But some of those items will be, feature in our financial case.
Thank you. So some of the councils may. Do you know what the councils have actually got debt-wise, and have you got a rough idea what the position is? Is it public knowledge?
Yeah, so those councils have to publish their annual accounts like we do. As I say, we're starting to analyse external borrowings, asset levels. As I say, some of the councils have investment properties, you know, hotels in far-flung places, council companies that generate returns, etc. So all of that needs to feed in. And there are some councils that are more indebted than others, and some who have significantly higher cash balances than others, and that all of that needs to be fed in. And clearly there is some way to go before any new council or councils have a vesting day, and those positions can change, and they can change quite quickly depending on decisions that those councils make as well. So I think we've talked in this chamber previously about the Section 24 provisions of statutory change order for local government reorganisation. That principle around councils making decisions that are in the best interest of the future of the any ensuing geography, and that would form part of any of those conversations that we'd have subject to Secretary of State decisions on local government for Lincolnshire.
Thank you, Andrew.
Just to add to,
Yes, Karen.
to that, we'd also have to bring together strategies, treasury strategies and risk profiles, because we'll all have different ones of those as well, and capital strategies. So a big exercise.
Sounds very complicated. Right, any other further questions? Thank you for your questions and comments. This now concludes the discussion for this item. Suggested proposal, I move that the board endorses the report and ask that comments and concerns raised in the debate be shared with the Executive Councillor for consideration. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you very much. Item 9. Update on IT services portfolio. This report on pages 59 to 64 provides an update of the Council's IT services portfolio and updates us on the transition of the Council's IT services from Serco to version 1, the creation of product teams and recent investments to strengthen resilience and cyber security. It also notes progress on procuring a new wide area network and moving towards the Council's new IT operating model. The actions the board consider the comments on the contents of this report and to agree and pass any relevant comments to the relative executive members. This report will be presented by Tom Baker, Chief Information Officer. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chair. It's a brief report and it follows on from the previous two reports that OSMB have seen. The first with respect to the new strategic technology partnership with version 1, and the second that related to the approach that we wanted to take around wide area networking and provision. It's a very busy time within the IT function as we migrate away from Serco to version 1, and this report provides a brief update on that activity. The Council, as members will recall, has outsourced its IT provision for somewhere in the region of 20 years, initially to Michelle and latterly to Serco. So a change of this nature is only the sort of second time that we've progressed something like this as an organisation. It's a significant piece of work. Obviously, all of the technologies that we use day to day are bound up within elements of the services that are going to be provided by version 1. So we signed the contract on the 30th of June 2025 after the appropriate decision-making processes were undertaken, and work has now been initiated to migrate services to version 1. Pleased to report that we're on track to hit targeted timescales articulated within previous papers. So we will look to have the service live from November the 19th, and as part of that new service, a number of improvements to provision will be made, and the paper lists just a few of those. And these include a new approach with respect to ordering new devices through the IT service catalogue, new approach to ordering software, the deployment of digital experience management tools that allows user experience to be monitored. That includes things like laptop performance, network speeds, the speed of web applications, battery performance, to allow us to become more proactive and more on the front foot with respect to service management. We'll be making inroads with respect to IT asset management, looking at licenses, but also hardware management with a view to maintaining the most optimal use of those assets and not being in receipt of assets that we don't use to their fullest extent. We'll be looking at estate-wide monitoring tools, and this will continue to improve our cyber stance. We'll be working to bring some enhancements to the current tech bar located in county offices, and that tech bar will include a number of new facilities such as a smart locker, which will allow staff to access new equipment if their laptop breaks, as an example, very rapidly, therefore enabling a much quicker turnaround and more productivity for individuals who are faced with issues with their devices. So a number of cyber and performance improvements are expected and are contracted for. As part of the same partnership, we are implementing the product teams that members will recall we articulated in the previous reports. Those relate to financial systems improvements, so ensuring robustness, ensuring opportunities around better service to suppliers and to citizens, and to make sure that we've got an opportunity to drive efficiencies within the finance area. We're looking to deploy capabilities and have deployed capabilities with respect to better use of information and data. This will help drive transparency, auditability, and allow us to be more targeted in the provision of services into the future. We are starting to set up a team that will look at AI and automation, so the automation of repetitive tasks that might require multiple keying into multiple systems. As an example, we'll be looking to provide capability, enhanced capability into our service centre to allow a more rapid response to citizen requirements and calls, and we will continue to drive out and use SharePoint and other tooling to facilitate more effective use of data, unstructured data in this particular instance around document and records management. And as part of that, we expect to reduce the amount of money that we spend on storing information, because we'll be removing duplication and focusing on the information that we need to maintain and keep, and not on information that is superfluous to us. So significant improvements being made in that regard. We are starting to move through a process whereby we are ramping up our engagements with directorate areas. Clearly, with any programme of this nature, especially in the current environment, given some of the challenges that I think we face, but also in the context of some of these really sort of potentially game-changing technologies, it's vital that the technology department works hand in glove with service areas, that we're driven by requirements that they have, and that we are managing change in a way that aligns with organisational directorate strategy, of course, being driven by the council. Further to that, I'm pleased to report that we're coming to the end of the Bull programme, and as part of that programme, we've refreshed somewhere in the region of 5,000 devices. We've migrated a lot of information that has been in our on-premise data centres to the cloud, therefore improving resiliency. We are on the cusp of implementing a secondary site for disaster recovery, hugely important in the context of the services that we provide at the County Emergency Centre. I'm pleased to report that we've implemented next-generation firewalls that provide a much more intelligent line of defence against numerous bad actors who exist on the internet. We're improving our cyber security maturity through additional tooling, including a security incident and event management system that allows us to aggregate all of our logging and activity across the estate. We've also implemented a security operations centre that means now that the council's infrastructure is monitored by cybersecurity experts 24/7. Really important. We only have to turn on the news and look at the sort of disappointing events that are happening there with Jaguar Land Rover, and indeed the interventions being made and articulated in the press today with respect to support for the supply chain for that organisation as a direct result of a cyber attack. So good progress being made there as well. I'm also pleased to report that we're on track to go out to the market for the wide area network that was articulated in my previous paper, and that we've seen a lot of interest with respect to that opportunity going further forwards. Some 14 organisations coming to a recent supplier event that we held up at the Lincoln Bishop University. So we will be looking to move and to execute against articulations there, and this is an activity that should drive, again, significant cost savings alongside the 30 million that members will recall has been articulated and detailed within the report for the new strategic partnership. I'm also pleased to report that the new IT structure has gone live on the 1st of September. This allows us to focus and to bring into the organisation key skills with respect to working alongside and maximising the returns that we get from our strategic supplier base. So in conclusion, a significant amount of change ongoing at this point in time. As part of the sort of transformation approach that we've set out, since I've arrived in the organisation, we've now moved through a number of significant hurdles. We've updated the IT structure, and we have put in place the remedial programme to address some of the critical issues with the underlying estate. We are moving forwards to the new partnership, and we expect to have a new wide area network contract signed around January. So significant progress. We're now moving to this really critical juncture where we start to look at how we leverage the capabilities that we've invested in, how we've carved out savings within the IT function to do that. Clearly, everything that we do needs to be aligned to business case, and we're now starting to ramp up our discussions with directorate areas, with the customer services centre, to start to look at how we can deploy these capabilities to defray demand, drive efficiencies, and provide a better service into citizens. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions? Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom. This all sounds really exciting, so I'm really looking forward to it because I do love technology. So I'm hoping this might sort out a few of my questions I've got. Currently, I can't print at home from my iPad. Obviously, I can contact IT and they'll assign it, but I don't really want to have to do that. I can't use the Adobe Read Aloud feature on the council papers. I can't sync my Google Calendar from my LCC. This makes things really inefficient because I find a way around it because I am quite tech savvy, so that's fine. It's not a problem to me, but other people may really struggle, including staff. And especially if you're visually impaired, because you really do need the read aloud function to work. Because whenever I try it on mine, it just says blank page. So I'm checking, have we got everything for the visually impaired and disabled people to use the new tech without having to go to the IT to say, can you sort this out? Thank you.
So I'm disappointed to hear that, Councillor Brooks. I think what we'll see as part of this entire initiative, and I've spoken about this before, you know, Serco are not necessarily a technology provider. So we're sort of kind of limited. We've got some wonderful people who work for Serco, but they don't have the organisation that's sort of sat behind them. So they're almost operating in this sort of island. They're doing the best that they can. Working with an organisation like Version 1, obviously you've got several thousand people who are tech specialists. And what that means is that they've got those centres of expertise that allow a better user experience because they're looking to address that across their entire user base. With respect to the visually impaired, I'm going to take that away and make sure that that gets addressed and that we've got a really clear offer going further forwards. If it's not already clear, I'll make sure I feed that into Version 1 and make sure it's a key part of that transitionary activity.
Yes, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Tom, because we have got a visually impaired councillor at East Lindsey District Council, and they had to scramble about to get everything sorted. So I just want to make sure we are on a game. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Davis.
Thank you for the presentation, Tom. That's really useful. I think in terms of understanding transitions and project workflows like this, while the narrative is useful, I think it would be useful to have some hard and fast numbers in there in terms of work streams and things like that. So that's more of a comment than a question, Mr. Chairman, but I do have two questions. Probably not terribly relevant, but I just wonder in terms of Version 1 are they exposed to some of the kind of the H1B1 visa issues that are coming out of the United States? I know they're not particularly reliant on overseas staff. And question 2, really, you allude to a savings profile. I just wondered whether or not you could share that profile with us and whether or not we're on stream with it.
Yeah, so as you've said, version 1 are predominantly UK-based, almost in its entirety. I think they do have some offshore operations. Well, I know they have some offshore operations, but they are small and they're based out of India. It's often a challenge knowing how much detail to put in these reports, but if it would help, I can put some key milestones in place for the next report. I can assure you that we are moving ahead through the knowledge transfer activity. Version 1 have been setting up infrastructure already on our network to deploy the tooling that they need to deliver services. So in the context of where we are with the plan, I think we are well progressed. Also, we are tracking on budget. So you recall the version 1 paper put forward a savings profile across the 10 years of the contract term. It also articulated the cost of change and the investment needed to move to the new environment. If it would help, we can bring that detail back in subsequent papers to reflect on how we are doing with respect to the savings profile. I'm also pleased to report that as part of some of that knowledge transfer work, we've started to highlight areas and opportunities for more savings. So as part of what we've been looking at the use of Azure, which is a sort of Microsoft cloud hosting environment. So we think there's some opportunities there. We've also looked at the council's underlying contract base and the contract base that was in position with Serco, and there may be opportunities there as well. And from a product team perspective, you recall that one of the product teams is looking at the application base, and we've highlighted and we've brought through activity to address reducing the amount that we spend on some of our contact technologies within the customer services area. So efficiency is really being sort of taken very seriously as we go through this process. And of course, when we've got that opportunity to do that complete drains up like we have here, there's an opportunity to think about not just improving service, but removing unnecessary cost as well.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Vernon.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you again for your report. Can I just go straight back to something you've just mentioned in regard to Councillor Davis, where you've talked about reducing the cost of contact activities within customer services, and just asking a little more about that before I move on to my questions, if that's okay. Thank you.
So I think there's a number of opportunities across not just the customer contact centre, but I think as part of some of the analysis that we're doing and looking at the underlying sort of technology base, we have multiple teams across the organisation taking citizen contact. So that might be the 0 to 19 team within the children's function. It might be engagement that happens directly with our financial services teams. And I think what we're starting to see out of the back of that analysis is that there is opportunities to support agents when they take contact. Now that might be through transcription services, translation services. It might be through interfacing line of business systems such that they don't need to be sort of retro keying information. There's more information that can be brought to the agent when they're talking directly to a citizen. So significant opportunities there. I think it also allows us to start to think about a wider contact strategy. There are multiple points within the organisation where citizens can make contact with us. And whilst progress has been made in this area, I think there's opportunities to do more. I think there's opportunities to provide more information to individuals interfacing directly with citizens, such that they're better prepared, are more able to take calls, and we have less frustration with respect to people maybe feeling that they're being passed around the organisation. So, yeah, a significant opportunity, and it will be a key area of focus going further forwards. And I suspect we'll be bringing back more papers that articulate this area more. Also mindful of a sort of big shift, really. I think we probably all use it in our own lives, right? You know, I don't really go into the bank that much anymore, and I appreciate that, you know, that's not the same for my grandparents, right? They like to go in the bank, right? And it's not one size fits all. But I think when we're sort of talking about the prevalence of mobile technology and that people are comfortable using that, by and large, like I say, not everyone, but there's an opportunity there to think more broadly about the sort of relationship that we want to have, appreciative of some of the services that we deliver, and of course they're very sensitive in many instances, but there's an opportunity there, I think, to look at, you know, apps and other capabilities to support, you know, maybe a quicker response for individuals at a lower cost as well, I hasten to add.
Thanks, Tom. Councillor Vernon.
If I may just come back on that slightly, obviously I'm delighted to hear that you're considering other methods, but we must ensure that our most vulnerable members within our county area are still able to speak to a person and receive contact. I would question whether there is going to be the possibility of having a, for example, customer service centre who is able to access all parts of an individual's record for GDPR reasons. I think some data is sensitive, and I would have concerns about any member of staff being able to access very sensitive information. So I'd like to sort of just raise that point at this stage, although fully accepting that it makes sense for more information to be available to someone on the phone. We've got to have a definition of what is acceptable and what isn't moving down that process. If I may go on sort of further with my comments, one of the things I've written down actually prior to your presentation was that AI cannot be a substitute for having competent staff in place who can deal with perhaps something that doesn't tick a box. And whilst I welcome the introduction and potential increase in use of AI when moving forward with digital technology, we do need to be sort of very aware that our customers are people. We are not talking about sort of a product and whatnot, and we need to make sure that we maintain that level of contact on a personal basis. I think changing anything to do with IT is a huge risk. As a business owner, it would sort of cause me sleepless nights for days on end as I change system or something like that. So I'd like to be absolutely crystal clear that you have a process in place if the worst should happen and something goes amiss with this sort of changeover. I'd also like to comment on the security measures that you've got in place. Enhancing cybersecurity, I think, as we all know, given what's happened with M&S and Co-op over the last sort of few months, this is probably one of the largest risks facing any organisation at all, and I'm pleased that you're looking at that sort of with more detail. Can I just be clear, though, that sort of although we are moving to much more digitally based, we could still function with a pen and paper if necessary, if we were subject to a cyber attack, because I think so many of our services are absolutely critical. We've got to have a backup in place. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vernon. Tom.
Thanks, Councillor Vernon. There's quite a lot in there. Firstly, with respect to, see if I can remember it all. Firstly, with respect to sort of data provenance, governance, information assurance, that's a hugely important area, and two of the work streams that are in the paper sort of go directly to sort of addressing some of the challenges that we've got there. So we have structured data within our line of business systems, and we have unstructured data in terms of, you know, Word documents, spreadsheets, those sorts of things. We are looking at a number of material improvements with respect to how we manage that data at this point in time. So increasingly we need data to target services, less money. We need to be laser focused in our activity. So the implementation of the Fabric platform allows us not only to aggregate data, but to look at the data quality. It also allows us to look at things like data loss prevention tooling, right? So we can actually start to see if data within that system is leaving the organisation, as an example. So we can put in a number of controls around that. Better use of SharePoint is, I think, a huge enabler for this organisation. The amount of time that people spend looking for information is a significant challenge. And I think that is reflective of a lack of controls in place around a lot of it. So you need to provide access to file shares or SharePoint sites. If we don't manage that in the way that we should, some of your fears or concerns about people being able to access data that they shouldn't are there. So two of the work streams that we've got within this sort of new programme of work are very much focused on those things. With respect to people, individuals, like I said, I appreciate that the services we provide are the most sensitive of services to people, often in huge amounts of need. Nothing can be more frustrating than getting that feeling that you're not being listened to, or that you're caught in some sort of machine, or whatever it may be. And what we're looking to do here is not replace people, but to empower them, to put in place the right information governance, to make sure that they've got the right access control, that they've got the right information that they need to do their job, to mean that when they're having a conversation with an individual that might be in a period of very high stress, they've got the information to hand. They can have a valuable interaction with that individual when they need it most. So absolutely, this is not about replacing, it's about facilitating, it's about enabling, where we do have the opportunity to use technology to do simple things quicker and a more expedient way, and allow funds to be released for frontline services, then I think we're probably going to look to do that. So this isn't some sort of blanket sort of technology exercise. I'm very clear with my department, and Andrew and Debbie are very clear with me that ultimately what we do is in conjunction with the service areas and aligns to their strategy, direction, and service planning.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor Parkinson.
Thank you. Just on the Ball programme due to conclude in November 2025, are we fully on track to complete that programme by November?
So we're on track to complete the vast majority of it, Councillor Parkinson. There is one area where we'll look at a bit of a continuance beyond that point. So we are upgrading our wireless infrastructure at remote sites as part of this programme. And again, it's a common theme really. As we've started to go through some of these activities, we've uncovered more things, and some of those things are quite serious. So we haven't been earthing network cabinets at some of our sort of remote sites, and if you think about that, you've got a lot of electrical equipment in a metal box. We've had to do more around some of the electrical works in some of our offices. We've had to do more with respect to removing some legacy cabling that was there before, Cat 5 to Cat 6, if that means anything to you. But this is really important work. So you recall I spoke about the new wide area network. If we want to get a really good service level, which of course we do, for the council, and we want to maximise our investment in that wide area network. That new network, of course, will cost much less than the current one. Having the right infrastructure in place in buildings is a prerequisite, because people won't sign up to give you a service level if you've got a bit of kit and say put it on that desk, or in some cases leave it on the carpet, which is sort of kind of where we've been at some of these sites. So. There's a real approach here to look at what we're spending, to spend it in the right way, to put really sustainable and supportable services in situ. And if you think about the sort of wireless provision, some of the systems that support the management of equipment within the fire service, they need the wireless network there to check things on and off fire units. Hugely important. If you are working in a child protection environment and you've not got the right wireless coverage, and in some areas the telephony is not the best, then we've had instances, and I'm pleased to say that we've moved through that now, where individuals have had to go outside to take calls about case files and the like. So that's going to run probably until March, and we're picking that up through the version 1 relationship. But really critical from a health and safety perspective, not just in terms of the IT staff, but also in terms of the services that we use. We have put in place effectively a regular review of this infrastructure, so we're sending out Serco staff to take pictures of what's there, in essence, to make sure that everything's there, that the cabling is as it should be. There's a wider dynamic around cybersecurity as part of that. We should have port blockers in remote kits. One of the, again, the big sort of threat vectors is that internal attack. So we're starting to, or we are actively picking up all of those things. So this will continue a little bit longer, Councillor Parkinson, but for very good reasons.
Okay, so some of the issues that you've raised there obviously are quite significant health and safety concerns, things that present fire risks and genuine danger to people's lives sometimes. So why has it taken us doing a new IT contract to figure out that we've got health and safety issues?
So this is something that we highlighted before the new IT contract. It's come about as part of the Bull programme, and you know, when I've come in with the new management team and looked at what we've got here, clearly we need to have infrastructure that's supported and patched, and we need to have the right coverage and provision in some other sites. So we've highlighted that, and it's been difficult because, you know, we've been on this sort of journey of discovery. But if you were to ask me for my sort of personal view on some of this stuff, there's a very clear reason that Andrew brought me into this organisation. It's to pick up some of these things and to start to address them. And I would, if I ever met them, probably have some conversations with the previous team. I think it's fair to say.
Thank you for your honesty, Tom. Thank God you did bring Tom in. Councillor Corey.
Thank you, Chairman. It serves me right for putting my hand up late, because some of the points I wanted to make have been covered, but in true local councillor style, I'll ask them again. Going back to fire stations, this is not an issue that's unique to Lincolnshire. Predominantly rural fire stations have the same issue, and that's the data dropout on the MDTs from when they leave the fire station, and then they pick up the Wi-Fi signal when they're on the appliance off to a shout. How confident are you that the new system will prevent that dropout for data on the MDTs?
So, Councillor Corey, I need to understand whether it's a wireless infrastructure on the unit or whether it's a cellular problem.
This is the problem that predominantly rural fire stations, rural fire services have been experiencing, that when the mobile data terminals are connected to or receiving Wi-Fi signal on the station,
yeah,
the data's been updated.
Yes.
Once the fire appliance has left the station, there is a temporary dropout in the availability of data to the mobile data terminal. So when a fire appliance is en route, there is sometimes a delay in updated data getting to the mobile data terminal. Now, in case anyone else wants to get excited about this, this is something that happens to predominantly rural fire stations because they don't have the signal in the countryside like they do in cities.
So there's a couple of things I'm going to do. So firstly, I'll speak to the team within Andy Gutherson's area that are looking at rural connectivity and to see whether they're picking up the sort of 4G, 5G, and if there's anything that we can do on that. I'll also take this away. I think again, version 1 have quite significant experience, predominantly actually in Northern Ireland with some of the blue light services over there, and I imagine that they've got very similar issues and challenges. There may be an opportunity to use other technologies, low orbit satellite, broadband provision as an example. People might be aware of Starlink as an example. So let me take that away. One thing I think that, you know, is interesting, and you know, I've not got an answer for this now, is how if in any way we can intervene with some of the providers of sort of 4G, 5G infrastructure to see if there's anything that we can do to influence that. The last thing I'll do is I'll look at the sort of level of bandwidth that's required for these provisions. Now, I suspect it might be quite high, but if you use lower power radio equipment operating at a different end of the spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum, to 5G, because it's lower power, you get a sort of a longer wavelength, right? Which means that the data can travel further, but because it's not a sort of high power wavelength, right, high frequency, it carries less data, but it can go further. So I need to look at that to see whether narrowband IoT or LoRa, which is low power radio networks, unlicensed spectrum, could be used in this context. So let me go away. There might be ways and means of materially addressing some of these things, but thank you for raising it.
It's an ongoing issue. Thank you for that, Chairman. And taking you back to the dual site disaster recovery with a secondary data centre at the County Emergency Centre and the next generation firewalls to ensure business continuity. I know for obvious reasons that you don't want to give details of that out publicly, but just to pick up on the question that Councillor Vernon asked, how does that fit in with our business continuity audits? Is that something that was picked up through the audits, and does that satisfy some of the criteria?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely it does, I think. And again, you know, there's a sort of degree of frustration that maybe some of these things weren't picked up previously, or when they were, there was an inability to get to the point where we had a solution in place previously. What we've got here is we've had the dependence on the Orchard House data centre. We're now moving through to the secondary capability. Beyond that, we've actually put in place a number of further resiliency measures in the cloud. Okay, so we do a lot of processing of information within the cloud environment, and again, whilst it's sort of up there, right, in essence it's in data centres, and we've effectively replicated data centres within that environment as well. So absolutely it aligns, it provides us the ability to route in multiple ways to the internet and to some of our key line of business systems such as Mosaic and Business World in the event of a failure with that primary data centre. So quite a lot of significant work ongoing. Rest assured that because of the work in the County Emergency Centre, they're very aware of us actually, and we've been working very closely with the teams around the wider resilience forum. Yeah, some good work there, I think.
Thank you, Tom. Any further questions? Councillor French.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions, but just to go back to Councillor Corey's point, sorry. You remember from the Growth Committee on the 9th of September, we had the broadband briefing about an update. It seems to be not just a problem for the fire service, it's all rural areas, and you'll probably find some difficulty when you make your questions to Andy Gufferson. But anyway, on to my questions. So essentially, there's been a bit of a deployment of kind of computer science corpus throughout the report, but when it comes to the residents, what can I tell them, the concrete changes that they're going to see from this multi-billion-pound overhaul to the IT system? And then when it mentions the streamlining of the 365 tools, I'm aware that Microsoft 365 and Teams and the package has been implemented for a while now. So kind of what exactly is the new product Teams going to deliver that our previous IT staff couldn't, and how does this represent genuine value for money?
There's a lot of good questions in there, Councillor French, but your observation around Project Gigabit is a really good one, and a very important point actually on the wide area network. I think some of the reasons or some of the challenges that we've had sort of a little bit of inertia around moving to sort of a more modern network infrastructure, one that's not in essence been owned by the council, but one that leverages national services, has been as a direct consequence of not having that connectivity within the county. And of course the work that's been done by the Place Directorate, Justin Brown and team, in driving Project Gigabit, and I think we're going to see a continued deployment of fibre to the premise across the county, which is excellent. It's excellent for small businesses, but it's also excellent for us because we can reduce the cost of our own network provision because effectively we'll use that infrastructure. So that's genuinely very positive. So one of the concrete things that you can say to your constituents is that we're reducing costs, which I think is very important. That we are actually leveraging the infrastructure that we've been working hard to put in place through initiatives such as Project Gigabit, which I think is also a very good news story. With respect to Office 365, again, I think we've implemented it quite rapidly previously. and with not sort of due care and attention around the information governance, information assurance piece. That's meant that we are in a position where we've got a lot of duplicate information, where we're spending too much money on storage, and that we'll look to reduce that. And hopefully, I know a lot of people get frustrated when they can't find information. We should be moving to a position where information is much easier to find, and we should be in a position, although we've got controls in place at this point in time, where we enhance those controls to make sure that people's information is safe. So some really significant improvements, and as I said, I think we're at the early stages of working with directorates, looking at the contact piece, looking at an opportunity to provide more streamlined services, looking at areas that involve multiple touch points and multiple services, use multiple systems. As an example, the educational travel piece uses around 11 line of business systems to fulfill requirements that people have with respect to bus passes, as an example. So anything that we can do there, and there are multiple things that we can do to provide a much more streamlined approach, one that we hope will be more efficient, should provide a much better service to citizens, and we expect to be able to do that going further forwards across a range of activities, including, like I say, within the finance department, hopefully such that we can support small businesses with cash flow and paying and all of those things that are so critically important. So as we sort of progress through this activity, we'll look to bring back more material with respect to the individual processes that we're improving, and I think this is something that the leaders asked for previously, to start to have that sort of drip feed of what we're doing almost on a quarter-by-quarter basis to drive out efficiencies, and as part of providing those more streamlined services, ultimately, hopefully, provide a better service to citizens.
Thank you, Tom. Any further questions? I've got a couple of questions, Tom. First of all, I think you probably come exactly at the right time. It's very concerning seeing big companies, multinational companies, being hacked en masse. It seems to be a different one every single week. Can you pinpoint what it is? It's more of a general comment, but can you pinpoint what it is and what they've not done and why they are actually getting hacked? Is it that they're not actually putting enough money into IT and into the firewalls? What's your thoughts?
It's sort of difficult to speculate on some of these things, because by their very nature, organisations and indeed enforcement agencies, don't necessarily want a lot of the information about these things in the public domain for fairly obvious reasons, especially when there's negotiation or not, as the case may be, ongoing with some of these bad actors. I think it's clear to see that we're seeing more activity, both from an organised crime perspective. We're also seeing the sort of hacktivist piece. We're seeing people with different political views. And I think we're sort of seeing, a continued evidence of sort of state-backed actors as well. If members are interested, we can show you some of the analysis coming in from our own firewall infrastructure, which highlights where people are coming from, what potentially they're trying to do, what information they're trying to scan. So it is sort of quite depressing, really, that I think we'll only see a continuance of these things with respect to the recent events within the transport sector, Heathrow, Gatwick, some of those systems, with respect to Jaguar Land Rover and the large retailers. These are huge organisations, critically dependent on these systems to manage their supply chain, etc. There's probably not been the level of investment, possibly. And I think probably in some instances, and you can see some big differences between the Co-op and Marks and Spencer as an example, the ability to have processes and procedures to allow you to respond and to react is hugely important as well. So you can make the investments in the technology, but unless you've got the people alongside that are well schooled and well versed in what needs to happen when these things do occur, then potentially you're at further risk, because what you do within the first stages of these activities can be material in your context of sort of recovering from those things. We've still got a long way to go, I think. And as we move to the sort of next stage within our sort of maturity, there's a few things that I think we need to do more of. And maybe members would like to be involved in some of these things. Firstly, I think we're moving to a more adaptive stance so that we're able to operate in more real-time environments to threats that emerge. There's a phrase in the IT sector called day zero, right? And day zero is that day when a new threat becomes real for the first time. No one's seen it before, everyone's got a scrabble to respond, quite significant. What we also need to do more of is that some of that sort of wargaming, disaster planning type activity where we go through a scenario and we look at how we respond to those scenarios. And we've done some desk-based exercises within the IT function, but of course, a response to something like this requires a much broader set of activities that would involve potentially our communications department, our HR department, would involve members. So to be able to work through some of that, if people are interested, then we'd very much welcome your engagement in some of those activities.
Thanks, Tom. One other question. When will we notice a difference when the changeover happens? Are we going to see anything change on the emails or anything different that's changing?
The change will be more apparent to different people. So, the 15 sites where we have upgraded the Wi-Fi, we've seen a much better response from people with respect to coverage and capacity. So I think it depends where you are to a certain extent with some of these things. As we roll out the new wide area network, we know there's a couple of sites that are constrained around bandwidth. So again, there'll be an improvement in performance. Some of this will be not visible. So we're implementing a piece of software called Riverbed, which is this sort of user experience monitoring tool. And what we want to do is we want to head off issues before they impact people. So we'll be looking at monitoring of networks or performance of the device, and you might get a call that says, well, you need to replace your device, right? We might see activity within the logs of that device that show it's going to fail in a couple of weeks, as an example. So some of this will be very sort of seamless. Hopefully, what we'll see is a change of direction within the tech bar environment. And what we want to do as part of the new contract is to make the sort of swap out of devices, etc., as seamless as possible, as light touch as possible, because people just need to get on and work again. What we'd like to happen is that sort of material shift within that sort of environment. So you can go along and say, well, I've got a new team as an example. I want to set up a new SharePoint site. I want to use some of the communication tools within the Microsoft 365 stack to communicate with people that might be on different sites or might be working from home or whatever it may be. So to have that sort of shift, or for people to come into that environment and say, I've got this process and it's really painful. I've got to fill in 15 forms at this point in time. Can't we do something about it? And actually some of the technologies that we're using lend themselves to really quick development and to have that big shift. So it's going to be gradual. Some of it won't be noticeable. Some of it will be heading things off at the pass. But some of it will be much more noticeable, and a lot of that will depend on where you're located and some of the systems that you use.
Thank you very much, Tom. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Brooks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Tom. It's coming back to Councillor Corey's point about how we're going to deal with going back to pen and paper. So I'm all for this trial of basically everything goes down and we see how we all cope, and I think all councillors and staff should be involved. So thank you.
Yeah, noted, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Findlay.
It might be a simple question for you, but just listening to everything that's been said, my mind got ticking about if end of play, everybody's gone home on a Friday afternoon, and Friday night at midnight there's a cyber attack, and are we relying on AI and technology till Monday morning when people return to work, or is there some sort of fail-safe backup system that's been worked on to actually, so when you turn up Monday it's been dealt with, or is somebody ready to deal with it 24/7?
So it's a combination of all of those things, Councillor Finlay. What we have in place are a number of systems, right? So even your laptop device, it creates logs, right? It will flag things, right? There's endpoint security that's sat on that in the same way that there's security software running on our servers, in the same way there's security software running on our networks and our firewalls. What we've put in place is a system that aggregates all of that stuff, right? Because it's too much for a human to wade through, right? It's just not physically possible sort of thing. You'd need to have a vast team of people doing that. So clever bit of software called a security incident event management system. That then feeds a security operations center, which is run by an organisation who are absolute specialists in this field that we've recently contracted with, and they operate that 24/7 environment. Now, as part of the deal with version 1, they'll also have teams that are on call, and as part of our process, we'll have the policies and the procedures and the run books and all the rest of those things that should something happen, we'll be able to respond and the team will be there 24/7. We're also looking at more advanced capabilities, so looking at something called infrastructure as code. I don't want to go too techie in all of this, right? But that will allow us to effectively rebuild systems very, very quickly in the event that we would need to do so. So we're looking at better monitoring. We're making sure that we've got the contracts and the teams in place to do that. The response, such if it happens at midnight on Friday night, there's people there. They've not been down the pub. They're on call. All that sort of good stuff. That they're there to respond. And we're also looking at in the event of the worst happening, and you should always plan for this, I'm afraid, despite the efforts we're making, it's never ever going to be 100%. There's always people working on ways to trip you up. Looking at our mechanism to respond and to respond quickly and to make sure that we've got information and data backed up, it's all part of the sort of bigger puzzle, as it were. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Tom. Councillor French.
Yeah, it's not a question. I'm just going back to something you said earlier. I would be interested in seeing and perhaps having it been shared with the members what you mentioned earlier about who's trying to access the firewall and what they're scanning and that kind of thing.
So give me a shout. Let me know when's good for you, and pop up and have a cup of coffee, and we'll get some of the cyber team to. I think the leader was very interested when he came for his recent tour of Orchard House in some of this sort of capability. So yeah, it's a bit of an eye opener, shall we say?
Thank you, Tom. Any further questions? I move that the board endorse the report, and I ask that comments and concerns raised in the debate shall be shared with the Executive Councillor for their consideration. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. Item 10, for information only, Scrutiny Committee Work Programme. The report on the pages 65 to 98 provides an overview of the work programmes of the other scrutiny committees that the board has oversight of. Discussions on details of the particular items are appropriately held at meetings of the relevant scrutiny committee. Should you wish to comment on any of these, please approach our scrutiny officer following with today's meeting. Actions to note the report. The report is for noting, therefore I move that the report be noted, that any comments to be passed on to the scrutiny officer following this meeting. Can you please raise your hands if you agree? Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I recognise this is not the time to discuss specifics regarding items on the agenda, but I sort of have a matter regarding the principle of an item being on a scrutiny panel's decision after the decision has been taken by executive. It always seemed a bit pointless for it to go to scrutiny after it's already been to exec, and I wondered if I could just seek some clarity on that. If you prefer me to discuss with Chiara after the meeting, very happy to do so, but it just seems the principle of it going is...
Yes. Yes, if you could talk to Chiara or Nigel afterwards, that'd be great. Thanks. 11. Overview Scrutiny Management Board Work Programme. The last report in our packs is on page 99 to 112 and provides an overview of the contents of our own work programme. This item is intended for information only, providing relevant details about the board's work programme. If members wish to suggest relevant topics for future agendas that fall within the remit of the board, could you please contact our scrutiny officer after the meeting. These will then be discussed with myself, the Vice Chair, and officers to determine the best way to handle the suggestion. Members of the Overview Scrutiny Management Board were invited to consider the report and make comments on the contents of our programme. I'm pleased to confirm this. We can make a comment. Yes, Councillor Parkinson.
There's a new budget coming on the 29th of November. So on the 18th of December, there's an OSMB. Would we be able to get just a financial update from the Treasury around any potential changes, for example, even if it's a very brief outline of the impacts of that new budget?
Yes, Kiara, yes.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, we can take this discussion offline and see if we can facilitate that, or if it can be facilitated as an update through any other avenues. Thank you.
Can you please raise your hand if you agree? Thank you, that is agreed. That now concludes the business of this meeting. Thank you everyone for your attendance. Thank you, Tom.